While they're figuring that out, we want to tell you that Emma's book is available for purchase by the Learned Owl. They're both outside in the hallway, and they'll be in the rotunda. Please remember, after this, we're going into the rotunda. We're lucky and incredibly grateful to have several organizations here tonight, including the AFTD, Association for Frontotemporal Degeneration, the Alzheimer's Association, the Ohio Council for Cognitive Health, and Summit County Public Health, who are dedicated to caregivers and helping those with memory challenges. After the program, you'll find those representatives at their tables, and they'll be happy to give you information and sort of stop by and say thank you to them. At the library, we're very committed to supporting this segment of our population. We have recently launched, in case you don't know this, new initiatives for those needing memory care and their caregivers. We have memory care kits. Some of you may or may not have checked them out. They're available to check out. And beginning in 2026, we'll be hosting monthly memory cafes, offering a welcoming space for people to make connections and get support. If you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to sign up for our newsletter, talk to one of the reference librarians, ask any of the staff members. We're here to help as much as we can. Tonight, I want you to help me welcome this wonderful lady who has never been to Ohio. This is her first trip to Ohio. Emma Heming Willis is a mother, stepmother, wife, advocate, and co-founder of Make Time Wellness, a brand devoted to women's brain health. After her husband, Bruce Willis, was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia, she became a passionate voice for care partners and families navigating this awful mess. Through her storytelling and advocacy, Emma hopes to help others feel less alone on their caregiving journey and provide resources as best she can. Emma is joined in conversation with Anna Huntsman. Anybody hear her voice in the mornings? On Idea Stream Public Media, where she is a reporter and a producer. So one more time, please give a great Ohio welcome to these two wonderful women. It's all yours, Anna. Here, take mine, Anna.
I promise I work in radio and audio.
Hello? Oh, great.
There we go. All right. We are ready. So thanks again, everyone, for coming out here tonight. I'm super excited to get to talk with you and learn a little bit more about this book that you wrote and your caregiver journey. So just so that we're all kind of on the same page, the headlines are everything, and I just want to know, how long have you been on this caregiving journey? How long has it been? And tell us a little bit more about Bruce's disease.
Yeah, I think for me as a caregiver, it's really, the whole thing is so gray. It was really hard for me to sort of pinpoint when I actually started to become a caregiver. Bruce was diagnosed in late 2022 with FTD, but prior to that, he was diagnosed with aphasia, which was a symptom of a disease. So it wasn't the actual diagnosis. By the time you get to a diagnosis for FTD, because it is misdiagnosed, it is diagnosed very late, life is already upside down. So the timeline of when I became a caregiver, I don't know, a couple of years prior to that, I would say.
Gotcha. Okay, but it was 2022 was when this diagnosis happened. I was just curious about your decision to want to write this book and talk about your personal story. Was there a specific moment where you were like, I really need to do this? What was the catalyst?
This book came out of a very traumatic doctor's appointment. When we went in for our diagnosis, and I say our because dementia, FTD, is a family disease, we walked out of there with a diagnosis I couldn't pronounce. I didn't understand it. No hope. Nothing. Just to check back in a couple of months. And it wasn't that the doctor wasn't good right? Like, I don't want to say that this was a terrible neurologist. It's just that the care isn't there for the caregiver. And when we left that diagnosis, I had to go and search the web to sort of figure out what is FTD? What does this look like? What will this look like over the course of the years? How will this progress? How will our 2 young children cope? And I started digging and then realizing that, we were sinking, and I needed to start trying to figure out how to put support of experts and specialists, which I did. And what I realized is, as I was, reaching out to these experts and they were helping us in such an incredible way, what I knew is that this was a privilege, right? Caregivers don't have the time, the energy, sometimes the resources, and definitely hardly access, because it is really hard to access some of these people that I was working with. And I knew I was sitting on valuable information, and I knew how unsupported caregivers are, and I wanted to be able to put it into a book to be able to share with the next caregiver.
And there's, I think 10 or maybe
25.
Oh, well, the 10 main chapters, I should say.
Sorry, I thought you meant the experts and specialists.
Oh,
there's
yeah.
25.
I was like, I did
Experts
read
and
the book, and I
specialists,
didn't
yes,
think
no.
there were 25
No, there's
chapters.
not 25.
Wait a minute. Sorry, I just had that in school moment where I didn't do all the homework by accident.
Sorry, I jumped the gun.
Well, what I was going to say is I'm going to talk about the different main ideas of the different chapters and a lot of the different advice that you give and the support that you give. But I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more about kind of the early signs that you first started to see with Bruce. I know you mentioned that it was actually kind of frustrating, like in your marriage, like some things were just off.
Yeah, so FTD is frontotemporal degeneration, and it can show up in 3 different ways: behavior, language, or movement. So for Bruce, he was diagnosed with primary progressive aphasia, so it's FTD, PPA, and that means that it was affecting his language. So communication skills, was just lacking. He used to have a severe stutter as a child, and I noticed his stutter starting to come back, but never in a million years would I think that was a symptom of a young onset dementia. So that's sort of how it came up. There was some behavior, but that wasn't really what I was noticing. But I just realized that there was something off. There was just something not right in our marriage, and I didn't know what it was. Again, never would I have thought that Bruce would have a FTD.
And I think you kind of immediately started in this research phase once you got that. Like you said, you couldn't barely pronounce it. Can you talk about the importance of doing all that research and figuring out the specific illness that your person has, and what advice do you have about that?
I think getting to a diagnosis is so crucial. I was speaking to someone the other day, and she said, "Oh, my mother has dementia, but they don't know what type." And I just thought, my goodness, how frustrating that must be. Because even though we got to FTD and that was not the diagnosis that I was thinking that we were walking away with, it was important to know, because then I could really educate myself on what it was and how I could best support Bruce. Because the thing about dementia is that when people think about dementia, they automatically think about Alzheimer's, because that is the most common form of dementia. But our brain does so much more than just hold memory. And frontotemporal dementia, it affects the front part and the temporal lobes. So again, that was important to know, so that we would know, well, you know what, we can't over-explain things to Bruce. It's better just to keep it very simple. These are the things that you start to learn and understand, and that's why I think getting to a diagnosis is crucial, so that then you can best support your person and that you can be supported as well.
There's a really interesting chapter in here about brain health, and we were having actually a conversation before we walked in here about why it's so important, but also, compared to some other illnesses and diseases, it's not as well researched, I guess. What is lacking, and what have you learned through your research about brain health? What can you share about its importance?
I mean, early on, I didn't know anything about brain health, but what I started to realize as I was working with some of these neurologists was that, okay, we know there is no treatment, there is no cure, but what can we do to help the brain? And I really started to learn about the brain and how we can keep it healthy, and prevention is better than cure. We don't want to wait until we're seeing signs. We want to start early, and it's never too late to care for our brains. What I had learned is that 1 in 5 women will develop Alzheimer's. We're much more at risk than men. And when was the last time someone asked you about your brain? They don't. So that's why, it's important to understand what a healthy brain looks like, how we can care for our brains, so that we can age gracefully.
Any tips to share about different things we can do?
The pillars of brain health, so that's sleep, it's exercise, it's nutrition, mental stimulation, and community. Being with people is really important. And these are very simple. So for me, it's like I think about what have I done for my brain today, but when I know that I'm caring for my brain, the rest of my body benefits.
You just did a perfect little segue into my next question, which was about the importance of cultivating community. So you talk about how important that is, and there's certain things you want to look for in that too. Like you mentioned having someone who's maybe one step ahead of you in the caregiving journey. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think as caregivers, we're so isolated. This is something that we're doing on our own. It's very hard to get out and be social. It's very hard to leave our person at home if we don't have support. So our circles become really small. And I know for myself, I was trying to sort of navigate this quietly because I didn't want this. I had this extra layer of not wanting it to get out before we were ready to talk about it, because the media is something else, right? So I just ended up isolating our whole family, including our young children who were 8 and 10 when Bruce was diagnosed. They weren't having play dates. We weren't having anyone come over because I didn't want to have these conversations with parents. But also talking about the importance of getting to a diagnosis is because that when we got to FTD, I was able to then join forces and look for resources with the AFTD, the Association of Frontotemporal Degeneration. So, that was so helpful because they were able to link me up with another family with young children, tell me different resources, things that I could tap into. And then from there, I've been able to go to educational conferences and be able to be in rooms with other FTD caregivers. And there is something about being with another caregiver, any caregiver, but an FTD caregiver who fully grasps what this looks like. You feel seen, you feel validated, you don't have to over-explain, under-explain, they just get it. So I just feel like caregivers are so isolated, but we need to really find a way to get back into community. It is so important.
Aside from finding people who were also in a similar caregiving journey, did you get back into hobbies or just social things? And do you have any tips about getting back out there into the community that's not related to, whatever it is you're caregiving with?
Yeah, I think this idea of like self-care, I don't really love this term because I think it's been overused. And when someone says, what self-care are you doing? How are you looking after yourself? It's just hard. It's a hard thing to do when you're caregiving. I like this idea of making time because for me that feels a little bit more actionable. Like, what do I want to make time for? What can I do that will actually feed my soul? So during this gray area of when I started to become a caregiver, I didn't feel comfortable leaving the house. So I started doing things around the house, like I started this little garden patch, and that felt very much sort of in my control, but it kept me close to home so I could keep an eye out on everyone at home. I would weed and water and plant and then kill the plants and then go and buy some more plants. So there was that, and that I love that. The gardening now has become my meditation. I'm not great at it, but I love being outdoors. I love the sun on my face. I love hearing the birds. It's just something very simple. It doesn't have to be this idea of massages and getaways. It could just be picking up the phone and calling a friend, like having a deep conversation. But these are important, even if it's just for 10 minutes a day, trying to find connection, trying to find something that you like to do. If it's reading a book. I mean, my daughter, she came into my bedroom one night, and I like to read. There was a point where I was reading a lot, but she's looking at my bedstand and she's like, "Do you only read books about dementia?" I was like, "Well, yeah, right now I do." She's like, "You've got to change it up." So, I think it's important to educate ourselves, but it's also really great to read a fiction so that we can get away and be pulled out of that world and into a different world.
What have you learned about, I guess, being gentler to yourself and being kinder to yourself? Because that's a part of this too. It's not necessarily self-care. I mean, I guess it kind of is. It's just, did you have to cope with any guilt or anything like that, I guess?
All the time. Yeah, I think guilt comes with caregiving, but I think that it's really important that we try and be a little kinder to ourselves. I think dementia is really messy, and I think that we have to give ourselves some grace, and we're not always going to be perfect, and we're going to, have bad days, but you know what? You showed up, and you have to tell yourself, you know what? I showed up today. I tried my best, and tomorrow is going to be a different day. And that's how you have to pull through, because the guilt that we feel just gets in the way of caring.
I did want to ask you, in the book you reveal kind of a vulnerable piece of information about moving Bruce into a different house. And you said this was the hardest decision you've had to make during your caregiving journey. I was wondering how that's been going, and for anyone out there who is a caregiver and might be, struggling with having to make hard decisions like that, how did you accept that it was time to ask for help?
I think dementia plays out differently in everyone's home. It is not a one-size-fits-all. I think what we have to do as caregivers is provide the safest environment for our loved ones as well as our children, and that looks different for everyone. What I realized is that there needed to be a shift because Bruce's disease was progressing, and it's only going to progress. And what could I do to set up an environment that was safe for him, and then also where our children could have a home that fit their needs, because they didn't have that. And I wanted to talk about that because I think that there's so many people that have had to make this decision of moving their person maybe into a care facility and being judged and scrutinized by others because of it. I knew that when I revealed this, that the floodgates were gonna fly open. And I was okay with that, because I understood, how could you do that? Why would you do, you're a terrible wife and all the things. And it's like, okay, but why are we so judgmental against the caregiver? Why are we not trying to support them? So I just felt like I wanted to be able to validate and have someone else feel seen for these really hard decisions that we have to make, because I'll tell you, I don't want any of this. I want my husband to be well. I want him back in my home. I want our kids to have their father back. I don't want any of this. So, for people to think that it's just an easy decision for any of us to do, we don't want it either.
And that's been going well. That's worked out really well for your family.
Our family is really thriving because of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad to hear that. And
I don't know if I should say thriving.
well,
We're doing well.
doing well. Yeah. I mean, I think I heard some like snaps and claps, so I think that really resonated with the folks in this room. I mean, speaking of your kids, can you talk about juggling parenting and caregiving? And I mean, like, how do you even talk to children about it in the beginning and through the process?
Yeah, again, Mabel and Evelyn were 8 and 10 when Bruce was diagnosed. But, again, that was a diagnosis that came late. So, they were growing up around their dad declining. It's hard. It's not easy. But I was able to find a really great specialist who taught me how to talk to our children, the information to give them. And you want to protect your kids and you don't want to tell them all the hard truths, but in fact, it's actually more important to be able to be truthful with them, to give them bite-sized information. And in the book, I sort of break down age range and what a child might be able to hear and process. You would speak to a 8-year-old differently than you would a 17-year-old. So that's really broken down beautifully in the book. And that was with Megan Graham, who is just an incredible child psychiatrist, psychologist, and she really helped me, navigate that. It's hard. Parenting is hard, and so is caregiving. And doing that at the same time sometimes felt just impossible.
So I think, is it tomorrow that the book will have been out for a month? Right?
Okay.
And it debuted at number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list, which congratulations.
Thank you.
Since then, I mean, what kind of feedback are you hearing from people? Is this really resonating with a lot of people? Has it been pretty good feedback?
It's been really great feedback. I mean, I think to get onto the list I didn't write the book to hit a list, right? I wrote a book because I wanted it to be a supportive guide to somebody else. But hitting the list was really incredible because what that does, it just allows more eyes to get onto the book. It allows that book to have a little bit more wings and to get into the hands of the next caregiver that might need it. I think I loved every minute of writing that book. I loved putting that book together. I loved releasing the book. And what I love are these events when I'm in a room with other caregivers. Sorry, I'm getting emotional because that's what I did it for, to be able to see other caregivers, meet other caregivers, because we are isolated, and I was so isolated for so long. So it's so beautiful now for me to be able just to sort of like, I've revealed every sort of skeleton in my closet in that book, and now people are just meeting me with so much love and gratitude, and I get to be with them and hear their stories and connect with them. It's really just been one of the most beautiful experiences I have had, like real meaning. We are so discombobulated in this world and so disconnected, but there is something about this journey that has become so beautiful and meaningful and impactful to really be with someone and connect with someone and see them. There's nothing like it, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I know you mentioned Bruce was a big reader too, so he would be very proud, obviously.
Yeah.
We don't have a ton of time left, but I did want to ask you, because you start the book talking about your love story with Bruce and how you guys first met and what attracted you to him, and so we all know him as the TV star, the movie star, but can you tell us something we might not know about him? What's in those early days, I guess?
I mean, such a romantic, very shy, very awkward, which I thought was interesting. Just such a softie. I was thinking about this the other day. When you think about Bruce, you think about Die Hard, and you think about these action movies, and I think, my God, he is such a good actor because that is not him. He is such the opposite of that guy. Just wants everyone to be safe and like, there's a corner there, let's put a pillow on it so no one hurts their shin. Just very, he would hate that I'm saying this, but just such a softie. I think he wants everyone to think he's such a badass. He is a badass. But he's really, really gentle Pisces.
Oh, okay. I was told by many people that I had to ask you if he thought Die Hard was a Christmas movie.
He did a roast. They roasted him. I don't know how many years ago this was. And actually, it was one of my favorite lines. They said, he said something like, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? I was going to use a bad word. Am I okay to use the F word in here? Okay. He says, no, it's a fucking Bruce Willis movie.
Well, see, now I'm glad I asked. So I was like, I don't know, should I? I'm glad I asked. What do you consider it a Christmas movie?
You guys are going to hate this. I really only saw Die Hard like a couple years ago. So you shouldn't really ask me.
That's okay. I've actually only seen it once, and it was in a room full of film majors who were analyzing every scene. So I didn't have the best experience. So I have to rewatch it just by myself.
Christmas movie? Okay, raise your hand if it's a Christmas movie.
Yeah, right. I'll do a room poll. Okay. Actually, about half and half.
Fine. It can be a Christmas movie. It's fine.
Yeah. Again, just kind of to wrap up here, I guess, is there anything that you wish you would have known at the beginning of whenever it started, this caregiving journey?
That there's support. There's actually support. I walked away thinking there was no support. This was it. We were done. But in actuality, there is support. And I think I wish someone would have told me that in that doctor's office. And I also wish that someone would have told me that you will laugh again. You will smile again. I am sitting with grief consistently. I can't even talk about it. Sorry. It's okay. And I have a life that's full of joy, and I didn't know that. I didn't know that I would be able to have both. So, for anyone that's walking through this, it's hard, but I just want you to know that you will find joy. You will be able to laugh. Life will just look different, but you will smile again. You will find joy.
All right, well, let's give it up for Emma Heming Willis. On that note.
Because of that clock on the wall and the shortage of time, we're going to adjourn kind of early and get to the rotunda so she can sign books and have conversations. We're not going to do a question and answer here as we normally do, because I think each of you want, hopefully, some time to get her to sign a book maybe, or to visit. By the way, there are refreshments. There are also brochures around the building for our upcoming programs. And don't forget to stop at the organizations and talk to them and thank them for coming, if nothing else. And thank you all for coming. I hope you have a good evening. I hope you enjoyed yourself. And please come to the rotunda.